Well, Jane, you've written what I found to be a wonderful book called Spiral Up. Certainly wish I had read it in the past when I was faced with some challenges in the management world. But let's start out by saying, who ought to read this book? Who did you write this book for?
Scott, I wrote this book for managers young and old who have a sense that there may be another way of managing that's different from the one that they've been taught as what I'll call project management or initiative management 101. And we all know what that is. It's that highly planned, very disciplined, very orderly and predictable kind of management process where you lay out what you're going to do and you get an achievable goal, and then you line up your resources all full of experience and you march forward with all the upper level management all lined up and all the resources in your pocket. This is really a very distinct alternative to that, and it turns out that wildly successful initiatives are managed in this very different way. So I wrote this book for anybody who has it in mind to be incredibly successful in management.
Okay. Do you have any sense, if you look at projects like you're addressing in this, in today's corporate world, do you have any idea what percentage are successful in terms of their own defined goals?
There have been a lot of studies in this regard, and it doesn't really matter whether you're talking about outsourcing or information systems projects or business process redesign or mergers. The numbers are all surprisingly similar. And the answer is F, right? F.
Okay.
that in a good year, maybe 50% of the initiatives that managers take on end up achieving what they intend to achieve. And that's a terrible performance. I mean, if we were stupid or evil or poorly trained, I would say, okay, fine, F is what we deserve. But the managers in this world are fine people with good values. They're well-intentioned. They're smart. They work hard. And I don't see why F is the right answer for corporate initiatives.
So for those of us who read the Dilbert comic strip with the pointy-haired boss who finds new ways to fail as an art form, you don't feel that's the norm. Those people are out there, but you feel the average manager really wants to be successful.
I think that's true, and people want to make a contribution. People want to do something meaningful. Just scratch the surface in any business team, and you'll get people feeling energized by being able to do something that matters, and that's really coming from their heart. Most of what passes for modern management tries to either ignore that phenomenon or wipe it out in order to get good discipline. And a wildly successful initiative, on the other hand, actually leverages that energy and those feelings of aspiration and intention to do something that really matters.
Before we really get into your 5-step program, give us an example, if you would, of what you're talking about, a real-life example, and then we can go back and dissect it a little bit, but a real-life example of someone who has taken your method and it worked.
All right, well, let me make it clear. I discovered this method by talking to people about what they had already done. So these are the common threads in actually bona fide, wildly successful initiatives. I don't know of a single person who took my method and then tried to apply it.
Okay.
So not so far anyway, although I would hope that would happen if people read the book and find something useful in it. So let me tell you a story about a refinery in Lima, Ohio.
Okay.
It's a long story, as many wildly successful initiatives are, but the refinery was a once high-performing asset. It turns out to be owned by BP at the time of the story, which is in the mid to late 90s, and the luster's off the asset. The bloom is off the rose, so to speak. Okay. It's fallen behind in terms of performance and maintenance, and it's not profitable. And the BP management decides, well, we've looked at it 6 ways to Sunday. We can't think of a way to make it profitable, but we know a person in our organization who's pretty creative and pretty different, and if anybody can find the right answer for this refinery, he can. So they give Jim Schaefer the responsibility to go to Lima, Ohio, and manage this refinery. And he looks at the problem, and this is one aspect of wildly successful initiatives. He looks at the data with new eyes, the reasons why it's not profitable, the reasons for poor performance, and he comes up with a different attitude about what needs to be done from all the experts and all the people before him. That's a hallmark, right? Just don't take the accepted wisdom. Get it right, get the answer right. So he goes to Lima, and he starts a very different, what I'll call, management culture there. Instead of demanding certain things and holding people accountable and requesting tasks to be done and following up, he gives people some room. He gives them a mandate, basically, and says, look, go forth, come up with ideas to improve the plant, and come back and tell me when you finish them. Don't come to me ahead of time and get my permission. I don't know as much as you know about how to make this wonderful. Go do the things that you think are important and tell me what you've done. And so he also he gets a little bit of runway, I suppose you could call it, from his senior leaders to do some things that would be unthinkable. So he tried to build volume in the plant by selling refinery products to his competitors. Unheard of. And he would tell you they got some benefit, right? They didn't have to bring the oil in or the gas in on the pipeline, so they got it a little more cheaply. But BP got most of the benefit. So anyway, so he's working away on some things to make the plant more profitable, and other people in the environment are doing that as well. And BP decides they're going to sell the plant. So that's a bit of a disruption. People know they're going to get a new boss, but basically they've begun to make some headway on their profitability. So they're starting to see progress, and they're not worried by that. Meanwhile, there's another person at the plant by the name of Paul Moniz, and Paul is recognizes that in order to get really truly different performance, you need some new thinking, and he goes on a quest. He takes himself on a journey to find better answers, and he talks to people, he finds university people, he really searches, and he ends up with a fellow by the name of Winston Leday, who has developed a game that helps manufacturing people understand this wholly new way of thinking about profitability and maintenance and performance. So this is a longer story, but so Paul Moniz brings Winston Leday in, and they end up training a lot of people in the factory, not necessarily the top people, but more importantly the people who have their hands on the day-to-day decisions about exactly what's going to be done. So folks get a whole new mindset about maintenance. So things go on, they're making improvements, the progress is starting to show, and BP decides it's not going to sell the plant. In fact, it's going to close it. It's going to show up with bulldozers. Right? This is not a small disruption. This is a huge disruption. Right? People have worked hard. Jim Schaefer, by previous agreement, now leaves, and the plant, the people of Lima, Ohio, to whom there's a refinery on the city flag of Lima, so this is a symbolic asset for them. And they get together, the people at the plant, and they say, what should we do? We just all quit? I mean, we have 2 years to run before the bulldozers show up. What should we do?
So they've got some time here. They've got a window.
They've got a window. There is no reprieve. Death is on the way. It's a death sentence being told you've got 2 years to live. But in the next 2 years,
have a good time.
Have a good time. Do your jobs. Run the plant, and be fine. They decide, instead of checking out or becoming complacent, like they might, they decide to keep making the plant better, which is an unbelievable kind of community, group, team resolution. And they get to this resolution because of the progress that they've been making and the new union management kinds of relationships that they've
So
been
this was a
developing.
union plant.
Absolutely, union
Okay.
plant. But they get to this resolution because they're beginning to see how there's this other way to work, which is this wildly successful way, with people taking decisions on their own recognizance and everybody taking initiative and ideas mattering and so forth. So they choose to keep running as effectively as they can. I know it's a long story, but
No, it's a great story.
the upshot is the plant continues to improve, and the management there, I think this is fabulous. The managers look at each other and say, well, we're going to spend whatever we need to spend on maintenance. What can they do to us now? We'll do what we have to do. But it turned out they didn't have to spend. They had more than enough money in their limited budgets because the plant had gotten so good at what it was doing. And it was now, instead of a lower performer, it was in the top quartile of plants in the country.
Wow.
Unbelievable performance that this group of people decided to bring together. And so they're working away, they're continuing to get better. The mayor of Lima and Jim Schaefer, who's now in Cleveland, get together and behind the scenes find a buyer for the plant. And the buyers, the inflection point in the buyer's decision process, and it's a very complex process, but this buyer said, so is this the end of the line? Are there any more performance improvements to be had? What is it I'm really getting here? And because of the nature of the performance that's been turned in by this group of people, this buyer becomes convinced that this plant has only a positive trajectory in front of it. So they make a long story short, they buy the plant, they walk in a month before the bulldozers are supposed to show up. I may have that a little bit wrong, but very shortly before death happens to the plant. And everybody's collected in the gym at this moment, trying to write down and save what they've done so that other people can benefit from it. I mean, this is an amazing story. And they say, guess what? We've bought you. You have a future. And
Wow.
and it really was wonderful. It was wonderful for that buyer. The plant has changed hands a couple of times since then, but everybody who's participated since BP sold it has made a great deal of money in the process. And the plant continues to thrive, and people have jobs, and the community continues to resonate around this asset.
Well, that is a great story. One that probably holds a lot of hope out for other industries in this country that are afraid their jobs will be moving away somewhere soon. But it's also a great endorsement for the things that you've written about. So let's talk about those just a little bit. You've got what amounts to a 5-step approach within this, I think it would be fair to say, of which the first is reach beyond your grasp. Now, I think most managers would say, reach beyond my grasp. I should also be getting my resume circulating because I probably just wound up with a new job somewhere down the line. What would you tell them that it's worth taking this risk?
Well, you, as a manager, you have to decide what you care about most, which is keeping your job or making the contribution that you potentially can make. As some very smart people would say about risk, there is no value without risk. If you choose not to provide value, that's your option, or to provide limited value, that's your option, and you can do that by taking no risk. If you're being paid to manage in today's world, then it seems to me you're being asked for your brains and your capability and all the things you can do. Risk comes with the job. And I think this is a more interesting way to think about the possibilities than just to try to fend it off and keep the wolf from the door in terms of your own job security.
Okay. And when you say reach beyond your grasp, give us a definition of that. What do you really mean for people to do when they do that?
Well, stated simply, it's try to do something you've never done before that seems to be meaningful and important for the people that you care about. It doesn't have to be any more grand than that. So, for example, Chet Wayland at the EPA said, you know, the people of this country ought to know what their air quality is, because if they could see what it was or tell what it was today, they might care more about it. And then we, the Environmental Protection Agency, wouldn't have to enforce air quality regulations. We'd have this groundswell of people demanding good air quality. So that's reach beyond your grasp. I mean, he didn't have a clue how to do it at the time. I mean, it's a very challenging problem. But he said, okay, I'm going to go for that. I'm going to go for that goal. Another example, an individual who's in the underwater mining industry said, well, we need to simulate all the physics and sound problems in an underwater mining rig. And nobody knows how to do that. And all the times it's been done before, it's been poor, and the resolution hasn't been adequate. It hasn't worked. And this individual is really turned on by doing something people haven't done before. He loves a challenge. Many people do, right? And he says, I want to go for that. And you say, well, what, maybe it won't work. And he said, I don't want to do the things other people have already done. That's not fun for me. Why am I here in this world? This is an aside, but I don't know if you've read Dante's Divine Comedy.
I have.
But
in English, I'm afraid. But
me too. But Dante says it's a high order sin to not use the skills and capabilities you've been given, to not use your gifts. And I don't think we today think about that in the same terms as they did back then. But I think the folks who are heroes, and there are many heroes in this book, but the folks who are heroes of these wildly successful initiatives have said that to themselves. I have skills and talents. I owe it to the world to use them for something important.
I might also say, if you've read Dante's Inferno, you definitely would want to avoid sins. That's very good. Secondly, you say step off the edge. Now, if you don't have a golden parachute, that doesn't necessarily sound like something that you'd want to do either. What do you mean in this? The step off the edge, the make space, and again, what's the impetus for that?
Well, again, let me make a distinction between Management 101, the disciplined, predictable way we normally do things, and wildly successful initiatives. If everything is predictable, you don't have to step off the edge. You've got your plan, you've got your resources, you can see one step in front of the other, you can see the end goal, A goes to B directly. If you really don't know where this could go, and you want to allow yourself the possibility that it could be amazing in its result and its impact, then you need to step forward without really knowing all the steps that are going to happen in front of you. And what does that mean? That means step into a poorly defined arena. Take the first step, manage as far as you can see, but don't worry that you haven't gotten all the steps in front of you mapped out. In fact, if you did have them mapped out, you would probably be taking the wrong steps. You probably wouldn't do what you have in mind. I mean, you've probably heard this from other people, Scott. If I knew ahead of time what this was going to take, I never would have done it.
I might have said that once or twice.
But if you look at the accomplishment that happens as a result, it's profound. So it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing to be perhaps a little naive or maybe a little bit optimistic about the things you want to take on.
So it's sort of taking the attitude of it's good not to know what you can't do. Because you might do it.
You might do it, absolutely right. And space is really open area. You're not really rigidly organizing and structuring what goes on. For example, just there are a couple of engineers on the diaper line in one of the world's largest consumer goods companies, and they had this. It wasn't a mandate. It was sort of an offer, in a way, from the top part of the company to dramatically improve manufacturing reliability. And nobody knew how to do it. And there were a lot of really different ideas about what would work, and you couldn't sort out the right ideas from the wrong ideas because there were just opinions, and there was some evidence here and there, but not enough so you could say, yes, this is the right way. And then these two engineers, they said, let's take this on. Nobody said, you're the ones, you have to do it. They said, they volunteered. They said, let's take this on. And they made space for themselves. What is that space? Well, they had their day jobs, but they took some time. They weren't doing their day jobs. They were doing this other exploration. And they reached outside of their company, which at the time was unthinkable. It was a very insular company at the time. And they said, we better talk to some people who don't work here. They might have some ideas we haven't had before. And that's what I mean by space. Now, if your boss is going to lean over your shoulder and say, why aren't you working on the thing I asked you to do 10 minutes ago? Well, that's you won't have the space to do that. So it requires a kind of, I use a bad word, but I mean it in a very positive sense, a kind of collusion between the management and the people who are exploring to find these new answers. Management has to look the other way. They have to let it go on under their noses, which is a way to, it's kind of this unmanagement way to encourage people to take on wildly successful things, give them a little room.
Okay. You say, get it right. Everybody wants to get it right, don't they? Right. Or do they?
Well, it's true. Everybody wants to get it right. Frequently, though, we don't question enough. We don't think critically enough about the given wisdom. And that this example about the engineers in the diaper line is a perfect example for this, because there was plenty of information in the world about manufacturing reliability and how you get it and what the good trade-offs were and how you measure it and so forth. These engineers had an intuition, though, that what they knew, what the conventional wisdom was in the current research wasn't good enough. It wasn't right. It wasn't answering their questions. It didn't satisfy them. That's what I mean by, that's sort of the start of get it right. Get to that intuition that says, this doesn't really work for me. And then they took themselves on a quest, much like Paul Monis's quest. And they said, we're going to find some answers that really do work. In this particular case, they ended up with rocket scientists at Los Alamos National Labs.
Wow. And
Los Alamos had new theories and new mathematics, very sophisticated. And these diaper line engineers had data. Los Alamos didn't have data, and the diaper line folks didn't have mathematics, but they were able to put the two together, and they got a wholly new way to think about the problem. Wholly new.
Wow. Very impressive. That's you also talk about creating a strong emotional field. Now, back to Dilbert. All those employees talk about cynicism. I mean, that's nothing can be accomplished. That's good. I've found generally that employees in a company do tend to be cynical. How do you overcome that to create an emotional involvement with a project like this, like you're talking about?
I think you're right. I think employees are cynical. And I think that if you look just at the aggregate, at the statistics, at those human dimensions that are actually correlated with company performance, there's really only one that can be shown statistically that really matters, and that is engagement. And that's exactly what I'm talking about, is people feel like they are important, their jobs are important, and not just as individuals, but their group is important, their work is important together. And that level of energy that you get in a management environment that actually cares about energy and deliberately energizes people, it will be orders of magnitude above the kind of work, the kind of thought, the kind of attention you get in a disengaged workforce. And I was thinking of sort of funny ways to talk about the book, because of course everybody wants to read about sex, greed, and drugs, right? And I don't write those kind of books. But this book doesn't have any sex, and it really doesn't have any greed, but it does have drugs in a way.
1 out of 3.
And how is that? the people who are involved in wildly successful initiatives talk about the experience using the language of drug addiction. Now, this isn't me. This is them talking. They say, I was hooked. I took the I took the needle. I couldn't give it up. It's and people in all kinds of projects talk about that. They get so emotionally involved in what's happening and in each other and in the collective passion of doing something important that they go well beyond what we would normally expect from people. I mean, these are folks sometimes using their free time, their off hours, their own resources in many ways to do things that are good for the company and good for them and good for people generally. So it's the energetic field is surprisingly important. I did a study not too long ago with another researcher, and we looked at energizing in organizations, and you can give people in organizations a little questionnaire and say, who gives you energy and who makes you feel like you'd rather slit your wrist than go talk to them. And it turns out that the slit your wrists people are more prevalent in the top parts of companies, and that the energizing people frequently don't even know they're doing it. I mean, that's one thing that I would like to encourage people to think about with the book. If you are one of those people, if you are an energizer or would like to be an energizer, then become aware of that, of what it is you're doing with people that makes them feel enthusiastic about coming back to talk to you about doing something that you care about together. And use that, because, I mean, that isn't mentioned in Project Management 101, and it is central in wildly successful initiatives.